Do you miss lots of greens around? Do you want to rescue your golf game, shoot lower scores, and essentially get good at golf? Hi everyone, my name's James, and if you want to do just that, please make sure you do hit that subscribe button below. Today we're talking about short game, and short game can often be overlooked when it comes to potentially how you're going to lower your scores. We all like to hit long drives, we all want to hit better 7 irons, high 5 irons, and of course powerful 3 woods, but we also need to make sure that we can scramble well in order to get those scores down. So today we're going to focus with the wedges, and we're going to talk a little bit more about what to do from a beginner through to a mid-handicapper, even maybe down to that low handicapper that potentially struggles to get up and down as often as you feel like you should. So the first thing we're going to talk about is with the short game, what do we want to do essentially with stance width and ball position. So I see so many people, and this is more of a beginner golfer tip, but I see people stand really wide with their feet and potentially stand at the golf ball like this. Now, this looks to me as though I'm trying to hit a 100-yard, 120-yard shot with this wedge. It doesn't look like I'm trying to chip it to this really downhill green and potentially hit some nice, delicate shots. You see, if I stand like this and try and hit a good chip shot, this is potentially what I'm going to get. I don't have control of the flight, I don't have control of the distance, because I don't really have much control over the low point of this wedge. So you'll see all wedges do feature quite a wide sole and they have bounce on them. So you'll see that this bounce is incorporated nicely into the club in order for you to use it with the ground. If I hit that bounce into the ground, that should essentially help me get a little bit more underneath the golf ball and of course get that ball launching up in the air. So the alternative to that is I see people who stand like this. Now, I'd almost rather see you stand like this when you chip in than be too wide, but this doesn't come without its problems. You see, if I was to stand really, really narrow here and try and hit a shot, that is the kind of shot that I get. I top it, it runs through the green. Of course, we're not getting the strike, we're not getting the control, and we're of course not getting any amount of spin whatsoever to hit that correct distance. So I want something nice and in the middle here. I want you to stand as though you're just kind of nice and casual. You're at the bar, someone's buying you the drinks, your name's Bobby, you don't buy your own drinks at all, and the ball's fairly central, if not just back of centre. So I can then rest this club just behind the ball, have a little bit of forward shaft lean. We're certainly not trying to create too much forward shaft lean here, because earlier in the video we spoke about the bounce of this club. Now let me introduce you to the leading edge. So the leading edge of this golf club is quite sharp. You'll see here that if you get this making too much contact with the ground, that's when you're going to start chipping like Mr. Bobby. And that's the last thing we want to do. We want to make sure that we're getting good contact with the ball and the turf, and we don't get these massive divots that you can see here. We can see Bobby's just had his first practice session of the Orlando swing. You see, if we have too much forward shaft lean, that's the kind of shot that we get, and you start to feel a little bit frustrated. So Brett Cooper's like this as well, our mid-handicap golfer who's on the channel. Bobby's laughing behind the camera, but it's actually not funny because it's such a simple fix, and if you struggle with duffing chips, it's so simple to do. So I want you to stand a little bit narrower than what we said earlier, nice and just kind of hip width, and I'm going to flare out the left foot ever so slightly so that I can just lean forwards here. The key for good short game is always have that pressure on your left side. We've got that face nice and square, and all I'm going to do is take the club away with my sternum and let the club bounce behind the ball. So you can see there that I've played a nice shot, we've got the right distance for that back flag, and I actually didn't have the best turf contact there. It wasn't the best ground integration, but that bounce has rescued me. The bounce has saved me, and that's the key to good short game. I remember when I was playing in quite a lot of PGA tournaments and regional tournaments and things like that, I have to have a good short game because I miss a lot of greens. Now, when I was doing that, I wasn't necessarily striking the ball perfect every time, but my technique allowed me to get away with shots. And if you can get away with shots around the greens, if your bad chip can be to 5 or 6 feet like that one was, you're more than likely going to hold more of those putts. So if you get to about 5 feet, tour percentage from there is around 75 to 80% to make it, but if you go to 10 feet, you're down at kind of 40, 50%. So it's a massive difference if you don't necessarily allow yourself to get that close. And you can see that with having that forward weight here, all I'm essentially doing is picking the club up, and as I rotate down, just let that club drop into the ball. So that was a much better strike. We had the spin, we had the contact, and that ball's releasing out there to a foot. So I'm always going to make that. That's pretty much a gimme you would hope. If you don't do this and you have your weight back, that's when you start to get that low scuttly shot. You start to hit, before I talk about that, let's talk about that turf interaction though. So I had the golf ball here, and you can see, I don't mind turf interaction. I don't mind a little divot there in front of the golf ball, because it means that I've had that weight forward, I've taken the club back, and I've just bruised that turf here with the bounce. So if you get that real good contact, that's the sound you get, and that's exactly what you get every time. So we have that level of consistency. You see again that ball's released out nicely to the flag there. So all of a sudden what we're trying to do is hit down on the ball ever so slightly without introducing that massive big leading edge into the golf ball. And you may have noticed that I've played all of these shots with the face square. So now we're starting to develop onto the kind of mid-handicap, even into the lower handicap aspect of these shots. And you might think, well, James, everything you're saying here, it's nothing new. You're not necessarily giving anything new. But we're not trying to reinvent the wheel. If you try to reinvent the wheel in golf, you might have a little bit of luck. You might start to potentially be a little bit streaky, but you're never going to be that consistent. All we essentially want to do here is feel like we're utilising that bounce. We're not really trying to use the leading edge unless you're in the rough. So from there, I know that I can play some nice consistent golf shots. It's imperative to have the right setup, have that weight forward. That weight never wants to move back. If that weight were to move back here, that's when you start to hit the equator of the ball and top it, because it's generally going to stay back. In the full golf swing, what we see is we start with the weight ever so slightly left, we move up to the right hand side, so the pressure moves to the right hand side, and then from there we release back to impact to have that weight forward with that forward shaft lean. All we're essentially doing here is recreating the impact position at address, and from there moving the shoulders and the sternum to create the club head speed. The reason why we have such a big movement of pressure, movement of weight, and a weight transfer in the golf swing is to create club head speed and of course create ball speed. But with the wedge, we're not trying to do that. We're trying to create a consistent amount of movement, so I know, first of all, how far that ball is going to travel, what kind of strike I have on it when it lands, and of course how high it's going to go as well. So if we were to kind of open this club face up, this isn't an easy lie to chip off. It's quite bare, and you can see that we have a real downhill slope. So the only way I'm going to be able to get close to that shot is either by having a lot of spin on the golf ball, but even then it's going to release on because of the downhill slope, or have some nice landing angle. So if I try and open that club face up a little bit, you'll see that that now incorporates a lot more bounce behind the golf ball. So this is a much more high risk shot than the shot we've been playing, but essentially what I'm trying to do here is allow the club to work under the ball and pop up in the air nicely. You can see that had quite a lot of spin on it and it stopped nicely, and the reason why I've been able to do that is have lots of club head speed and incorporate the bounce behind the ball. You'll see there was no real kind of movement of the turf there. We have brushed underneath it, but essentially all I'm trying to do is control that loft, control that speed, and just allow the ball to pop up in the air nicely. You can see that I've got a nice sawn off follow through there, and just allow that club to work nicely around my body, releasing naturally. And if you can do that, guys, you could go from a beginner to a tour pro standard short game very, very quickly, and of course you're going to get good at golf.